Hi, boys and girls. Miss Leaphart's back. We're going to read a couple chapters of Gordon Corman's The Hypnotists. We've only got a few left until we are done. We are on chapter 26. Jax came back to himself in a place that definitely wasn't IS-222. A sharp, antiseptic smell penetrated the nerve-ending gale of blowback. White walls, stainless steel. A hospital? He sat up in bed, tugging on an IV in his arm. That explained why. And in spite of everything, he felt pretty good. For days, nausea from the hypnotic onslaught had been preventing him from keeping anything down. But he could be given fluids and nutrition directly through the tube. Maybe Butch Rockman did me a favor. There's a first for everything. Then he felt the back of his head and wished he hadn't, an egg-sized lump under the soft gauze bandage, and pain to spare. Honestly, guys, I had to look back and see what he was talking about. If you recall, in the last chapter, Jax had been pushed down the stairs at his school, which I can't even imagine that would feel great. And I imagine the school steps at junior high, which, if you are my fifth graders, we'll learn about shortly if you haven't had siblings there. Ouch. So he had a hallucination or a pip image that pushed him where he started to collapse, leaned into the kid's girlfriend. The kid pushed Jax, and he fell down the steps. At least it's real, he reflected. Getting hurt was a reminder that, in spite of everything, the laws of science still applied to Jax and Opus. At this point, the bump on his head was practically the only thing anchoring him to the world. He peered outside the blue curtain that surrounded his bed. Nurses and orderlies bustled around, gurneys rattled, and muted PA announcements could be heard. Jax was still in his school clothes, so he guessed this was emergency. It was probably the best place for him on the day of the election. Not that he could explain the nature of his emergency to any doctor. He picked up the remote from the bedside table and switched on the TV that was mounted on the wall bracket. As he flipped channels, the headline in the CNN News crawl stopped his thumb. Exit polls point to Douglas' landslide and New York Dem Party. Victory would clinch nomination. Jax leaned back into his head bump, which was agonizing even in contact with the salt pillow. No amount of blowback could distract his mind from the meaning of this news. Mako's plan was working. And he, Jackson Opus, had been the key instrument to make it so, with one lousy video destroying a system that had lasted more than 200 years. But what choice did he have, with his parents' lives hanging in the balance? Of course, history was filled with stories of heroes who had made devastating sacrifices for the good of the many. I'm no hero. He couldn't even confront himself with the thought of that. If he didn't cooperate, Mako would find somebody else. There was nobody else. He'd been in a unique position to stop this freight train in its tracks. Instead, he'd poured on more coal. At the time, he'd followed the only path that made sense in order to protect his family. In the process, he'd subverted nothing less than the American system of democracy. And now that that was over, were Mom and Dad any safer? No. Mako hadn't removed the suggestion he implanted in them. They were just as much danger as before. Maybe more, because now the director knew Jax could be blackmailed into anything in order to save the people he loved. It almost tore Jax in two. He had more hypnotic ability than Mako. The director himself had said so. He should be able to overpower the man. But the one time he tried, he'd been slapped down like a pesky insect. His inexperience had held him back, and he'd never gotten any better. Because the only person who could train him and develop his gift was Mako himself. He was stuck. Nobody would ever take his side in this fight because the whole world thought Elias Mako had devoted his life to New York City education and blah, blah, blah. There was not a single living soul who could see the director of Santa for what he was. When the answer came to Jax, it was like a sunrise bursting over the horizon, casting a glow even though the firestorm of hypnotic images that still battered him. There was one person who saw through Mako. Axel Braintree knew from the start that Mako was ruthless, dishonest, and dangerous. He tried to recruit Jax to be his spy at the Institute. Jax had been stupid enough to rebuke him. Not anymore. Right now, the president of the Sandman's Guild was Jax's only hope. "Oh, you're awake," a white-clad nurse burst through the curtain. You took a nasty fall. How are you feeling? Pretty good, Jax lied. He swung a leg over the side of the bed. In fact, I'm really anxious to get to school. She pushed him back on with a hand that was gentle but firm. School will get along without you. Now, she maneuvered the tray in front of him and dropped a thick sheet of forms onto it. I have some admissions paperwork for you to fill out. But I don't want to be admitted, Jax protested. I want to be released. Well, you can't be discharged until you've been admitted, she reasoned, slapping a pen onto the top of the stack. I'll check in with you in a little while. First of all, he's a minor. He doesn't fill out paperwork. So I'm confused. Second of all, where are his parents? They should be the ones filling out paperwork. You can't admit yourself as a minor like that. Something's fishy. As soon as she was gone, Jack shoved the tray away, yanked the IV out of his arm, and kicked into his sneakers. The ER was busy. No one was going to notice a 12-year-old with a bandaged head. His sole worry was his own nurse. Losing a patient with an unfinished paperwork was probably a hanging offense at... He didn't even know what hospital he was at. He was almost home free, the door to the outside 10 paces in front of him, when a half-demented voice shouted, "Somebody grab that kid!" 2 large orderlies started to run towards him, but Jax was already running. He blasted through the waiting room and out the automatic sliders. Blowback still battered and disoriented him, but he was pleased to notice that the urgency of the moment was keeping him focused. He found himself sprinting away from Beth Israel Medical Center, losing himself in the Union Square Farmers Market. Over his shoulder, he saw the orderlies burst out of the building, look around, and turn back into the hospital. Apparently, he wasn't worth chasing, not even for the crime of unfulfilled out forms. This minor triumph energized him. Finally, something had gone right. Next order of business, Axel Braintree, the president of the Sandman's Guild, had given him a card, but Jax had no idea what he'd done with it. His once connection to the man was AZ Wash Laundromat on 7th Avenue, where the guild held its weekly gatherings. It was about a 15-minute walk from Union Square. He entered the grimy storefront, brushing past the customers in their baskets, and barged to the back room where the meeting had been. Empty. Okay, Jax told himself. You knew this was a long shot. He still has to be somewhere. Jax had resolved to return home and turned the apartment upside down, looking for Braintree's business card, when he recognized a very tall woman at dryer number 8. She was a Sandwoman? He'd seen her at the meeting. She was the one who used her living hypnotizing beauty contestant judges. Evelyn was her name. He rushed up to her. I need to talk to Axel Braintree. She fed quarters into the machine, never turning to face him. Do I look like his mother? I know you're in the Sandman's Guild. Please, it's an emergency. She regarded him for the first time. You're the Opus kid. What do you need Axel for? She brightened. You looking for a business partner? It's about Elias Mako. 10 seconds later, she had Braintree on her cell phone and handed it to Jax. Buffeted by blowback and embarrassed about how he dismissed the man before, Jax blurted out his message. Mako rigged the election. Braintree didn't ask how or demand any supporting information. His response was immediate and 100% perfect to the point. Where are you? The laundromat. Don't move, Braintree ordered. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'm going to read the next chapter, chapter 27, but I'm going to do it in 2 videos. So that way this one's not super long, and if someone can't sit and watch 2, that we will have that. So I will be back in just a second for chapter 27. Bye, guys.